Is justice really blind? Or do we live in a two-tiered justice system that judges its citizens based upon their gender rather than a crime they have committed? What is the penalty for a female teacher who has intimate relationships with her students? In America, most school districts have eliminated their sexual education classes as being too obtrusive into the lives of their young adults. These classes were meant to prepare students for the eventuality of having sex, but there was no eventuality for them having sex with their own teacher. Tonight, on Predator 101, we discuss a justice system based upon gender. In tonight's episode, the cheerleader, how she groomed a rich student. Normally, Predator 101 focuses on teachers who target their male students in what is referred to as an unlawful intimate relationship. Now, typically in those cases, you have the mother of the boy who is upset about the adult teacher taking advantage of her son. Now, this episode is a little different, because in this case, we have the mother who is targeting a school student for an intimate relationship, or what most guys know out there is, this woman raped this boy. Okay? But I must tell you, over the many cases that I've done for Predator 101, I have noticed one particular constant. And that constant is that no matter the income or status level in the life of the accused predator, the punishment is always the same. It never seems to vary. It doesn't matter if the woman is rich or the woman is poor. Mercy is given to her from the court. Now, that sentence typically leans more towards parole than if it were a male teacher or a male parent in an exact same situation. I wonder why. No wonder there's a system based upon gender. Now, this case is a shining example of these predatory women's excuses being the same no matter if they are offending boys from the bottom of the socioeconomic level or the top of the ladder. Now, this particular case of power and privilege involves Mrs. Molly Shattuck. Remember that name, Molly Shattuck. Now, she was featured prominently all across the United States. And not because she had an inappropriate relationship, or what you would call rape, with an underage boy, but because she was awarded a position on the Baltimore Ravens cheerleader squad as the oldest cheerleader in NFL history. Now, we're talking back when the Baltimore owned the team, the Ravens. Now, they've moved to another town now. Now, at the time, she was accepted to the squad. She was 38 years old. That is the oldest cheerleader. But many years had gone by when she had an inappropriate relationship, or what is called rape, with a 15-year-old boy while she was married to Mr. Shattuck. Now, he was a well-known CEO of an energy company that put him in the company of industry titans, and at that particular time, the current president of the United States of America, who you know as President George Bush. Now, you gotta be moving in circles when you're dealing with the president of the United States. Now, you can see Mr. Shattuck here on one of many different occasions that he was interviewed on CNBC because he was CEO.
We're at the National Energy Summit this morning, and we're talking to top leaders about many issues and opportunities ahead when it comes to energy. Joining us right now is Mayo Shattuck. He is the president, chairman, and CEO of Constellation Energy. And Mayo, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Becky. Glad to be here.
When it comes to Constellation Energy, the one thing that stands out versus everybody else you're looking at is what a strong nuclear component you have. And nuclear energy is a huge focus on this at this conference. In fact, it is one of the recommendations put forth by this group, saying that we need to push this country to be much more reliant on nuclear. How did that come about?
Well, Constellation is one of the few fleet operators of nuclear plants. We have 5 plants out of the 104 in the country. There are not many fleet operators. The origin of the business was a utility would build a single plant, and one of the big issues associated with the existing fleet of plants in the United States is...
Now, his resume at the time included as the director of the Gap Limited. And you know what that's about. He is director of Capital One Financial. He was a member of the board of Edison Electric Institute, the board of directors for the Institute of Nuclear Power, the board of trustees of Johns Hopkins University, and many, many others. Take a moment and look at him on CNBC.
Constellation Energy trying to expand profitability. Its subsidiary, Constellation New Energy, entering a pact with the New York Stock Exchange today to supply the exchange with wind energy. We're talking about that right now in a First on CNBC interview. With more detail is Mayo Shattuck, Chairman and CEO of Constellation Energy Group. It is nice to have you on the program.
It's great to be here.
Tell us more about this. I know you're ringing the closing bell today because of this electricity pact with the NYSE. Give us these details.
Well, the good news is also our 60th anniversary on the exchange, so they align well, but we've just signed an agreement to supply power to the New York Stock Exchange for several years, and it's all wind power. And so obviously the exchange has made the kind of decision that a lot of our customers have to go all renewable. They've chosen wind, and we're the provider. We buy it off the grid.
Now, Mrs. Shattuck's husband at the time of the offense had net worth of nearly $1 billion. And Mrs. Shattuck herself had a personal net fortune of $5 million. Now, they had been married for 17 years before she took advantage of the 15-year-old boy. Now, this means in actuality that she was married to her husband 2 years before that boy was even conceived by his parents. Now, the sexual offense in question did not occur in her family mansion pictured here. Now, that mansion was worth a grand total of $4.9 million. But that relationship was cultivated there. Now, Mrs. Shattuck began a flirtatious text with her son's best friend over his Twitter account that would ultimately lead to her downfall. Now, maybe a shortfall, but her downfall. Now, some of the early meetings with the 15-year-old boy ended up with a hug, but no other physical contact. Because in these particular cases, the women, just like the men, groomed the boy over time so he can allow the intimate relationship, or what is known in some circles as rape. But she then started to meet regularly for private trysts in her car, with one even taking place in the school's exclusive parking lot. Now, if by now you say none of this makes any sense, right? You might ask yourself, why would a woman of this type of stature just throw it all away? But she did just that. And every day she dug a hole for herself deeper and deeper. You see, police said Mrs. Shattuck, the mother of 3, picked the teen up from school at lunchtime every day, and they would talk and eat, and then get in the backseat of the car and kiss and make out, as if she was a high school student herself. Now, the victim told police Shattuck asked him to send pictures of himself, and he sent one shirtless and in his underwear. Now, that's a sexual relationship. Now, to give you some clarity of the school's campus, we present pictures so that you may grasp what she was getting herself into. Now, it just wasn't any ordinary school. Remember, they're multi-millionaires. So the private school with a tuition rate of thousands of dollars for classes that went from pre-K to 12th grade, along with college prep, and events that were enviable by most public school attendees with the same county. Now, let's take a look. But she saved the sexual assault for the day that she could get away from the school's grounds. The alleged sexual assault event occurred when Mrs. Shattuck rented an expensive beach house at Bethany Seashore, to which she took her children along with her and the boy in question. She wanted to get them away from where his school was. Now, Bethany Beach is a very exclusive small coastal town in Delaware. It's known for its wide boardwalk, its beaches, and has a population of less than 1,000 people, with a median income of $97,000. So that is a very expensive level. If you can find any community with 1,000 people that make a $97,000 as a median income, that's doing pretty good. And a 1% poverty level in that area. Now, on the night of the arrestable offense, Mrs. Shattuck decided to groom the young teenager by purchasing some beer that she willingly gave him along with the teenager in the home. Now, not only is she gonna have her way with this child sexually, but she's given alcohol to an underage minor. She's just stacking up the offenses. For somebody who's a former cheerleader and multimillionaire, you're really hitting pay dirt. Now, when it came time to go to bed, she put all of her children down for the night, along with the 15-year-old boy in question. But that wasn't the end of it. A short while later, she snuck back into his room. She got the visiting team up out of his bedroom and asked him to help her walk the dog. Now, as they walked the dog on the shoreline, she pulled him over to one side of the beach and gave him oral sex outdoors. Now, all total, she performed 2 sexual acts on this 10th grader. I did say 10th grader. Now, when they got back to the house, she invited the boy back to her bedroom where she was wearing an open pink negligee with nothing on underneath. Now, at that time, she asked him to have sex with her, to which he promptly turned her down. Couldn't do it, couldn't go any further. This young man may have not been mature, but he was mature enough to know that this relationship with a 47-year-old woman had gone too far.
You're watching MNN, the Men's Channel.
The next morning, the 15-year-old boy called his dad to come and pick him up earlier than expected. When he went back to his elite private school on the next week, he reported it to his headmaster. Now, this is very different. Normally, parents have to report to the school. Now, the school has to report to the parent. Like I said, normally schools do not have a good record for catching predator teachers when they do this type of behavior, but the headmaster moved on this outside of the school ground issue immediately. At least he acted on that. Now, when the headmaster of the exclusive McDonald Preparatory School in Owings Mills, Maryland, received information regarding this alleged inappropriate behavior, the first thing he did is he restricted that woman from campus, and he put out a warning about her. He reported the allegations next to the authorities as per the law governing what happens to kids in sexual situations. Now, officers, they did a good job too. They moved immediately with a search warrant to find and match items to the description that the boy gave, which was things like the pink negligee and beer, among others. She had set a trap for herself, and now the police were closing in on that particular trap. So 2 days after the indictment against Mrs. Shattuck for rape of a minor, and her husband moved to file for divorce from his wife of 14 long years. 14 years married, CEO of multiple corporations, billion-dollar man, $5 million woman, a house worth $4.9 million comes down to this. Now, due to her national popularity, Mrs. Shattuck's every move, including her court trial, was shadowed by the media. She used this platform to enhance her new book as well as exercise instructional career. For years, she had painted herself as a beautiful at-home mother. Now, many of her female friends, instead of separating themselves from her or her behaviors, formed a defensive line around her at each court appearance, as seen in this particular 2 News story update.
Shattuck was sentenced today for her rape conviction. She pleaded guilty to performing a sex act on her son's friend, who was 15 at the time. The parents of the victim were in that Delaware courtroom along with ABC 2 News' Don Harrison.
Molly Shattuck arrived to court today surrounded by women who supported her. The emotion of this sentencing trial weighed heavily on her face. Before court began, as Shattuck was sitting at the defense table, she became overcome with emotion, began sobbing, pushed her chair back, and went to her knees for 2 minutes before she could regain herself. Eugene Maurer, Shattuck's attorney, spoke to Judge E. Scott Bradley on her behalf.
You know, it's speculative what led her to engage in such an inappropriate relationship. I don't think we'll ever really have the answer other than some of the things I mentioned in court.
One of those things Maurer mentioned in court was that Shattuck's husband left her suddenly for a younger woman, and Shattuck was, quote, acting out a romantic fantasy, close quote. The victim's parents spoke in court today. His mother started off her testimony saying Shattuck is a criminal and a rapist. The mother spoke to the damage Shattuck did to her son, saying he has been, is now, and will continue to be affected. After Shattuck apologized for her actions and said she will spend the rest of her life trying to make up for what she did, Judge Bradley gave her a sentence of 15 years and suspended all but 48 weekends. Shattuck will report every other weekend to a Delaware jail. Along with the jail time, Shattuck must register as a Tier 2 sex offender and pay a fine of $10,650. Shattuck's attorney commented on the sentence afterwards.
So I think it was a well-constructed, wise, and in some ways brilliant sentence that the Judge imposed.
Along with a fine, Shattuck will have to pay for any future counseling for the victim. She will begin serving her sentence the first Friday in September. At the Sussex County Courthouse in Delaware, Don Harrison, ABC 2 News.
Now, I personally find it hard to understand why these particular ladies would be so quick to protect her for this wrong and slow to protect their same husbands if they had done the same thing. They couldn't do it. Now, at trial, Mrs. Shattuck was facing serious charges of third-degree rape, unlawful sexual contact, and providing alcohol to minors. 3 charges. Now, these charges were counter to the image that she sought to present of a wholesome image to the United States. But a sentence that should have carried 50 years maximum got reduced to 15 years, then deferred to probation and 48 weekends in jail. 48 simple weekends in jail. Now, this meant that she had to report to jail only on the weekend for 1 year. Now, if a guy did that, he'd probably be facing a full 50 years in jail after a public hanging. Now, amazing, I guess, we do live under a justice system based upon gender. So until the next case, good night, and thanks for joining us.